He laughed in her face when she asked for help with the moving costs, tossing a wrinkled prenup at her trembling hands. Carson thought trading his loyal, quiet wife for a 20-something Instagram model was the ultimate power move. He spent months bragging to his country club friends about his upgrade, flashing Tiffany's ring, and mocking his ex-wife's frugality. He thought he had won. He thought he broke her. What Carson didn't know was that the plain woman he just discarded was the secret estranged granddaughter of the country's most reclusive tycoon. He didn't know he just unchained a queen. This is the story of how a billion-dollar secret destroyed a narcissist's ego. The clinking of silverware against fine china at Le Jardin usually sounded like music to Carson Walsh's ears. It was the sound of money, of status, of belonging to the upper echelon of Manhattan's elite, or at least the echelon Carson desperately pretended to belong to. Tonight, however, the sound was punctuated by the stifled sobs of his wife of 6 years, Madeline. "Please, Carson," Madeline whispered, her hands gripping the edge of the white tablecloth. She looked small, her brown cardigan frayed at the cuffs, a stark contrast to the glittering clientele around them. "I don't have anywhere to go. My mother is sick. If you kick me out of the townhouse now, we'll be on the street." Carson took a slow sip of his Pinot Noir, savoring the vintage before setting the glass down with a sharp clack. He adjusted his silk tie, looking at her with an expression not of pity, but of mild annoyance. "Madeline, darling, don't be dramatic." Carson sighed loud enough for the neighboring table to hear. "We discussed this. The prenup was ironclad. You brought nothing into this marriage, and legally you leave with nothing. It's simply business. I supported you for 5 years while you built the firm." Madeline's voice cracked, rising slightly. "I worked 2 jobs. I paid off your student loans." Carson's eyes narrowed. He leaned in his handsome face, twisting into a sneer. "And I provided you with a lifestyle you could never dream of. But let's be honest, Maddie. You were a placeholder. You're beige. You don't fit my brand anymore." He pulled out his phone and swiped the screen, thrusting it toward her. On the screen was a photo of a woman who looked like she had been manufactured in a lab, blonde extensions, porcelain veneers, and a body that defied gravity. "This is Tiffany," Carson said, a cruel pride swelling in his chest. "She's 23. She has 2 million followers. When I walk into a room with Tiffany, people stop and stare. When I walk in with you, they ask if you're my assistant." Madeline stared at the photo, the humiliation burning her cheeks. "You're leaving me for an influencer. I'm leaving you for an asset," Carson corrected, signaling the waiter for the check. "Tiffany understands the game. She's vibrant. You're just exhausting. I need a wife who matches my trajectory." He threw a black American Express card on the tray. "I've packed your things. They are in boxes in the lobby of the building. The doorman has instructions not to let you up. I'd suggest you go collect them before it rains." Madeline felt the air leave her lungs. "You packed my things, but goodbye, Maddie." Carson stood up, buttoning his blazer. He didn't look back. He walked out of the restaurant with the strut of a man who believed he was untouchable, leaving his wife shattering into pieces among the dinner crowd. Outside, the rain had already started. Madeline stood on the sidewalk of the Upper East Side, surrounded by 3 soggy cardboard boxes containing 6 years of her life. She had $40 in her bank account. Her mother was in a state-run care facility in Queens that they could barely afford. As she struggled to lift a wet box, a sleek silver Porsche screeched to a halt at the curb. The window rolled down. It was Carson. For a second, Madeline thought he had come back to offer her a ride, a hotel room, anything. "Hey!" Carson shouted over the rain. I think you have my dry cleaning receipt in your purse. Leave it on top of the trash can." He laughed. The engine roared, and the Porsche sped off, splashing muddy water all over Madeline's only winter coat. Madeline didn't cry. The shock was too deep. She just stood there shivering as the world of wealth and privilege sped away from her. She didn't know it yet, but that mud on her coat was the baptism of her new life. Carson Walsh had just made the biggest mistake in the history of New York finance. 6 months had passed since the night at Le Jardin. To say life was hard would be an understatement. Madeline, now going by her maiden name, Madeline St. James, was living in a basement apartment in Queens that smelled perpetually of damp drywall and boiled cabbage. She worked 2 jobs. By day, she was an archivist at a dusty, underfunded city library. By night, she scrubbed floors at an office building ironically just 3 blocks from Carson's flashy marketing firm. She kept her head down. She wore grey, shapeless clothes. She was invisible. Every penny she earned went to the Shady Acres nursing home. Her mother, Margaret, was fading fast. Dementia was a cruel thief, stealing memories day by day. One Tuesday evening, Madeline sat by her mother's bedside, spooning watered-down soup into the older woman's mouth. "Did Arthur call?" Margaret asked suddenly, her eyes clearing for a brief, lucid moment. Madeline paused. "Mom, we've talked about this. There is no Arthur. It's just us. It's always been just us. He was so angry when I left," Margaret whispered, gripping Madeline's wrist with surprising strength. "I didn't want his blood money, Maddie. I wanted love. I chose your father. Arthur never forgave me." "I know, Mom." Madeline soothed her, assuming this was another delusion. Her mother often spoke of a rich father who disowned her, but Madeline assumed it was a coping mechanism for their poverty. "Rest now." Madeline's phone buzzed. It was a notification from Instagram. Against her better judgment, she had kept tabs on Carson. The photo on the screen made her stomach churn. It was Carson and Tiffany on a yacht in the Mediterranean. Tiffany was wearing a bikini that cost more than Madeline's car. The caption read, "Power couple. Upgrade. Living my best life. So glad I trimmed the dead weight." The comments were filled with sycophants praising Carson for trading up. Madeline felt a tear slide down her cheek. "I'm dead weight," she whispered to the empty room. Just then the door to the hospital room opened. Madeline quickly wiped her eyes, expecting a nurse. Instead, a man stood there. He was tall, wearing a charcoal 3-piece suit that screamed bespoke tailoring. He had silver hair, cold blue eyes, and carried a leather briefcase that looked older than Madeline. He looked like a shark in human clothing. "Madeline St. James?" the man asked. His voice was a deep baritone that commanded attention. "Yes." Madeline stood up, protective of her mother. "Who are you?" "Visiting hours are over." "My name is Benedict Joyce," the man said, stepping into the room and closing the door behind him. "I am the senior partner at Joyce Sterling and Halloway." Madeline froze. Everyone knew that firm. They didn't handle parking tickets. They handled Embrasil. "I don't have any money for a lawyer," Madeline said, her voice shaking. "If this is about my ex-husband's credit cards, my name isn't on them anymore." Benedict Joyce allowed a small, almost imperceptible smile to touch his lips. "This has nothing to do with Mr. Walsh, and I am not here to take your money, Ms. St. James. I am here to discuss your grandfather." "My grandfather died before I was born," Madeline said confusedly. "He was a mechanic in Ohio." "That was your paternal grandfather," Benedict corrected. He walked over to the bed and looked down at Margaret, with a strange expression, something like respect. "I'm speaking of your mother's father." Benedict turned to Madeline. "Your mother, Margaret, is the only child of Arthur Penhaligon." The name hit Madeline like a physical blow. Arthur Penhaligon, the Steel King, the man who owned half the shipping lines in the Atlantic, the man whose real estate portfolio made Donald Trump look like a landlord of a duplex. He was a myth, a ghost, a billionaire recluse known for his ruthlessness. "That's impossible," Madeline stammered. "My mother, she was a teacher. We lived in a 2-bedroom rental." "Because she ran away," Benedict said softly. 40 years ago, she fell in love with a mechanic. Arthur forbade the match. He gave her a choice, the fortune or the man. She chose the man. She walked out of the Penhaligon estate and never took a dime. Arthur struck her from the records. Madeline looked at her mother, sleeping frailly in the hospital bed. The woman who clipped coupons and wore second-hand clothes was an heiress. "Why are you here now?" Madeline asked, her heart racing. "Because Arthur Penhaligon died 3 days ago," Benedict said. "And despite their estrangement, he never changed his final will. He was a stubborn man, but he believed in bloodlines above all else." Benedict opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope sealed with red wax. "You need to come with me, Madeline, to the reading." "I can't leave my mom," she protested. "Ms. St. James," Benedict said, his voice dropping an octave. "If you come with me, you can buy this hospital and turn it into your personal guest house by tomorrow morning. Your mother will have the best care in the world." Madeline looked at the Instagram photo of Carson on her phone, the man who called her dead weight. Then she looked at the lawyer. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll go." The car ride was silent. Benedict Joyce drove a Bentley that glided over the potholes of Queens as if they didn't exist. They drove out of the city, heading north toward the Hudson Valley. After 2 hours, they arrived at iron gates that were at least 30 feet high. The sign simply said, "Blackwood Manor." "I thought we were going to an office," Madeline asked, clutching her purse. "Arthur didn't trust offices," Benedict replied. "He conducted business from his study." The driveway was 3 miles long. When the house finally came into view, Madeline gasped. It wasn't a house. It was a castle. Stone turrets, sprawling gardens, fountains that looked like they belonged in Versailles. They entered the grand foyer. It was cold, filled with marble statues and portraits of stern-looking ancestors. "We are waiting for one other person," Benedict said, checking his watch. "The executor of the charitable trust." A moment later, a side door opened, and a short, balding man in a cheap suit scurried in. He looked nervous. This was Mr. Finkel, the accountant. Benedict sat Madeline down at a mahogany table that was long enough to seat 50 people. He stood at the head of the table and broke the wax seal on the envelope. "The last will and testament of Arthur James Penhaligon," Benedict began. He read through pages of legal jargon. Small bequests were made to the staff, generous amounts, really. Then came the assets. "To the Penhaligon Foundation, I leave my collection of 19th century maritime art," Benedict read. Madeline waited. She expected maybe $100,000, maybe enough to pay for her mother's care and get a decent apartment. And now to the residuary estate. Benedict paused. He took off his glasses and looked directly at Madeline. "The entirety of my holdings, including Penhaligon Shipping, the Helios Tech Group, the real estate portfolios in London, New York, and Tokyo, and the liquid assets held in the Cayman Trust, are to be bequeathed to my direct lineage." Benedict took a breath. Since my daughter Margaret is deemed medically incapacitated, the entirety of the estate passes to her next of kin, Madeline St. James." The room went silent. "What? What does that mean?" Madeline asked, her voice trembling. "What is the residuary estate worth?" Mr. Finkel, the accountant, spoke up for the first time. He cleared his throat nervously. "As of the market close yesterday, after taxes, approximately $42 billion. Madeline's ears rang. The room spun. "Billion with a B." "Yes," Benedict said. "You are now the 4th richest woman in North America." Madeline laughed. It was a hysterical, bubbling sound. "This is a joke. Carson put you up to this. Is this a prank show?" "It is not a joke," Benedict said sternly. He slid a folder across the table. "These are the deeds. This is the power of attorney. You own the building your ex-husband works in. You own the bank that holds his mortgage. You own the country club he plays golf at." Madeline stopped laughing. Her hand touched the leather folder. She owned the country club. She owned his office. "There is, however, one condition," Benedict said. Madeline looked up. "There's always a catch." "Arthur was a man of image," Benedict explained. "He despised weakness. The will stipulates that you cannot liquidate the company or sell the majority shares for a period of 5 years. You must take the seat of chairwoman of the board. You must run the empire." "I'm a librarian," Madeline cried. "I don't know how to run a shipping empire." "You will learn," Benedict said, his eyes gleaming. "I will teach you. But there is a more immediate condition. To claim the inheritance, you must appear publicly as the heir at the Penhaligon Solstice Gala next month. It is the biggest social event of the year. The press will be there. The sharks will be there." Benedict leaned in. "And I took the liberty of checking the guest list. Your ex-husband, Mr. Walsh, has purchased a table. He intends to use the event to launch his new luxury brand with his new wife." A fire ignited in Madeline's chest. A cold blue fire that she had never felt before. Carson was going to be there. He was going to show off Tiffany at her grandfather's gala. At her house. She remembered the mud on her coat. She remembered him calling her dead weight. Madeline St. James sat up straighter. She brushed a stray lock of hair behind her ear. When she looked at Benedict Joyce, the fear was gone from her eyes. "Benedict," she said, her voice steady. "Yes, Ms. St. James. We have a month before the gala." She stood up. "I need a wardrobe. I need a haircut. And I need to know everything about hostile takeovers." Benedict Joyce smiled a genuine predatory smile. "I think, Ms. St. James, this is going to be a very entertaining partnership." The next morning, Madeline woke up in a bed the size of her entire former apartment. The sheets were Egyptian cotton, with a thread count so high they felt like liquid silk. For a moment she panicked, thinking she had overslept for her shift at the library. Then she saw the ceiling a hand-painted fresco of cherubs and storm clouds, and remembered. She was the heir. Breakfast was served in the solarium. Benedict Joyce was already there, reading the Financial Times and sipping an espresso. Beside him sat a woman with cropped platinum hair and glasses that looked like geometric art. "Good morning, Chairwoman," Benedict said, not looking up. "Eat quickly. We have work to do. This is Dominique. She is here to burn your wardrobe." Madeline looked down at her grey sweatpants. "Burn metaphorically," Dominique said, her French accent sharp. She circled Madeline like a vulture inspecting a carcass. Though looking at that polyester blend perhaps literally would be better. You are hiding, chérie. You are a turtle in a shell. Today we break the shell. The next 3 weeks were a blur of agony and education. It wasn't a movie montage. It was boot camp. Madeline didn't just get a haircut. She got a new identity. The mousy brown hair that she usually kept in a messy bun was cut into a sharp, angled bob and dyed a rich, dark chestnut that caught the light. Her skin was scrubbed, polished, and treated until the grey tint of poverty and exhaustion vanished, replaced by a glow that only money could buy. But the physical transformation was the easy part. The mental conditioning was the torture. Benedict moved into the east wing of the estate. Every day from 6:00 a.m. to midnight, he drilled her. "What is the P&L of the Helios Tech division?" He would bark at her while she was eating lunch. Profit is up 4%, but R&D spending is bleeding the quarterly projection. Madeline recited, her eyes scanning a tablet. "Correct. And the shipping strike in Rotterdam. Negotiations are stalled. We need to offer a 2% pension increase or we lose a week of transit. I authorized the increase this morning." Benedict lowered his coffee cup. He looked at her. "Good. You authorized it?" "I did." Madeline said, her voice firmer than it had been a week ago. "It costs us $4 million now, but saves us $50 million in delayed contracts. It was the only logical move." Benedict smiled. "You are learning to think like Arthur." One evening, deep in the archives of her grandfather's study, Madeline found a file that made her blood run cold. She was reviewing the list of companies that owed significant debt to the Penhaligon Estate's private lending arm, Chimera Capital. Her finger stopped on a name halfway down the list, Walsh Creative Group. She pulled the file. Carson had taken out a $3.5 million loan 2 years ago to expand his offices and buy the Porsche. He had leveraged his future earnings against the loan. But looking at the recent reports, Walsh Creative was hemorrhaging money. He had lost 3 major clients in the last quarter. He was 3 months behind on payments. Madeline stared at the numbers. Carson wasn't just living his best life, as his Instagram claimed. He was drowning. He was financing his luxury lifestyle on debt that she now owned. "Benedict," Madeline called out. The lawyer stepped into the study. "Yes, this loan," she tapped the paper. "Walsh Creative. It's in default, technically, isn't it?" Benedict glanced at it. "Technically, yes. We usually give a grace period of 6 months before we foreclose or seize assets. It's standard procedure." Madeline looked up her new haircut, framing a face that was no longer soft. Her eyes were hard. "Revoke the grace period," she said. Benedict raised an eyebrow. "That is aggressive. If you call in the loan now, he will be insolvent within 48 hours. "No," Madeline corrected him. "I don't want to bankrupt him yet. I want to own him. Convert the debt into equity. Activate the clause that allows Chimera Capital to take a controlling interest in the event of default." Benedict's smile widened. "You want to become his boss?" "I want to become his nightmare," Madeline replied. "But he can't know it's me. Not yet. Use a shell company. Let him think a mysterious investor is saving him. I want him to feel safe. I want him to feel arrogant again. And then at the gala, I want to crush him." "Arthur would have been terrified of you," Benedict murmured, taking the file. "Consider it done." Madeline turned her chair to face the window. Outside, the sun was setting over her vast estate. She wasn't the woman who cried in the rain anymore. She was the storm. Carson Walsh was sweating, and it wasn't because of the sauna. He sat in the locker room of the exclusive Oak Haven Country Club, a towel draped over his shoulders, staring at his banking app. The numbers were red, violently red. "Babe," a voice chirped from his phone, which was on speaker. It was Tiffany. "What is it, Tiff? I'm in a meeting," Carson lied, rubbing his temples. "I'm at the bridal shop. I know we're already married, but for the vow renewal in Cabo, I found this dress. It's stunning. It's only $12,000. I put it on the black card, but it declined. You need to call the bank." Carson closed his eyes. "The card shouldn't decline. It's probably a fraud alert. Just use your card and I'll transfer you the money." "Oh, fine. But hurry up. I have a nail appointment at 4. The line went dead. Carson threw the phone into his locker. He was drowning. The marketing firm was tanking. His clients were leaving for younger, hungrier agencies. And Tiffany. Tiffany was a black hole that consumed cash. He missed Madeline. The thought shocked him. He missed coming home to a clean house, a warm dinner, and a woman who never asked for anything. He missed her salary, small as it was, which covered the groceries and utilities so he could spend his money on suits. He missed his safety net. Walsh. Carson looked up. It was Grant, one of his golf buddies. Grant worked in hedge funds. "Did you hear?" Grant asked, tying his shoes. "The Penhaligon estate. They finally found the heir." Carson snorted. "Old man Arthur died. Who got the billions? Some charity for cats." "No." Grant lowered his voice. "A granddaughter. Nobody knows her name yet. They're keeping it tighter than the nuclear codes, but rumor has it she's cleaning house. She's ruthless. They're calling her the Iron Rose of Wall Street. She just hostile takeovered a shipping rival in Singapore yesterday before breakfast." Carson felt a pang of jealousy. Imagine having that kind of power. "Why do you care?" Carson asked. "Because," Grant said, "the Solstice Gala is next week. It's the debut. If you can get FaceTime with her, you're made for life. But invites are impossible to get." Carson nodded, feigning disinterest. Later that afternoon, Carson sat in his office looking at a foreclosure warning on his condo. He poured himself a whiskey. He was finished. If he didn't get a cash injection soon, the facade would crumble. Tiffany would leave him the second the money ran out. His friends would laugh at him. His receptionist buzzed in. "Mr. Walsh." "There is a Mr. Benedict Joyce on line 1. He says he represents Chimera Capital." Carson frowned. Chimera was the firm holding his massive business loan. This was it. They were calling to shut him down. He picked up the phone, his hand trembling. "This is Carson. Mr. Walsh." The voice was smooth, deep, and terrifying. "This is Benedict Joyce. I am calling regarding your outstanding debt." "Look, I can explain," Carson began, sweat beading on his forehead. "We had a slow quarter, but—" "Save the speech," Benedict cut him off. "I'm not calling to collect. I'm calling with a proposition." Carson paused. "A proposition. Our parent company has been monitoring your firm." Benedict lied effortlessly. "We believe Walsh Creative has potential, undervalued potential. We are looking to acquire a boutique marketing arm." Carson's heart hammered. An acquisition that meant a buyout. That meant millions. "I'm listening," Carson said, leaning back. His confidence returning instantly. "Our chairwoman is interested in meeting you," Benedict said. "She appreciates a man with your aesthetic. She believes you have the right image for our brand." "The chairwoman?" Carson asked. "You mean the Penhaligon heir?" "Precisely. She has personally requested your attendance at the Solstice Gala this Saturday. She wants to discuss a partnership. Exclusive." Carson nearly dropped the phone. The billionaire heiress wanted him. Of course she did. He was Carson Walsh. He was charming, handsome, and brilliant. The business failure wasn't his fault. It was the market. Finally, someone recognized his genius. "I think I can clear my schedule," Carson said, trying to sound bored. "Excellent. We will send a courier with the invitation. It is for 2. Bring your wife. The chairwoman is eager to meet the woman who captured your heart." "I'll be there," Carson said. He hung up and let out a whoop of victory. He grabbed the foreclosure notice and shredded it. He was back on top. He dialed Tiffany. "Babe, cancel the Cabo trip. We're going to the Penhaligon Gala. And buy that dress. Buy a more expensive one. We're about to be rich." 3 days later, the night of the gala arrived. Blackwood Manor was lit up like a supernova. A line of limousines stretched down the driveway. Paparazzi swarmed the gates, desperate for a glimpse of the mysterious heir. Inside the master suite, Madeline stood before a floor-to-length mirror. She was unrecognizable. She wore a custom gown of midnight blue velvet that hugged her frame like a second skin. It was off the shoulder, revealing the elegant slope of her neck. Around her throat sat the Penhaligon star, a diamond and sapphire necklace worth $6 million. Her dark hair was sleek, sharp, and lethal. Her lips were painted a deep crimson. Dominique the stylist adjusted the hem. "You look like a weapon, madame." "Good," Madeline said. Benedict entered the room. He was wearing a tuxedo. He stopped when he saw her. For the first time, he didn't look like a lawyer. He looked like a proud uncle. "The guests have arrived," Benedict said. "Mr. Walsh is in the Great Hall. He is currently drinking our best champagne and telling the Senator of New York about his visionary marketing strategies. And Tiffany, she is taking selfies with the ice sculpture. She seems to be bored." Madeline put on her long satin gloves. "Is the presentation ready?" "Yes, the screen will descend at your command." Madeline walked to the window and looked down at the courtyard. She saw Carson's silver Porsche parked in the VIP spot, a spot Benedict had reserved for him to inflate his ego one last time. "He thinks he's coming to sign a deal," Madeline whispered. "He is," Benedict said, handing her a glass of water. "He just doesn't know the terms yet." Madeline turned from the window. Her heart was pounding, not with fear, but with adrenaline. She remembered the nights she spent scrubbing floors while Carson spent her money on dinners. She remembered the prenup he threw in her face. She remembered the look in his eyes when he said she was beige. Tonight, she was going to paint his world red. "Let's go," Madeline said. "I don't want to keep my business partner waiting." She walked out of the suite, the heels of her shoes clicking against the marble floor like the ticking of a bomb. The great hall of Blackwood Manor did not just display wealth, it breathed it. The ceilings soared 30 feet high, supported by columns of veined Italian marble that had been imported before the First World War. The air was thick with the scent of white lilies, beeswax, and a specific heavy silence that only exists in rooms where the net worth of the occupants exceeds the GDP of small nations. Carson Walsh stood near the center of the room, vibrating with a nervous electric energy. He took a sip of the vintage Dom Perignon, the bubbles sharp against his tongue, and surveyed the crowd. He saw senators, tech moguls, and shipping magnates. Being here breathing this air felt like a drug. It confirmed everything he believed about himself, that he belonged at the top. He adjusted his silk bow tie, catching his reflection in a darkened window pane. He looked the part. He felt the part. "This architecture is a bit heavy, don't you think?" Carson said loudly to a trio of investors standing nearby. He gestured vaguely at the hand-carved mahogany paneling. If I were advising the estate on a rebrand, I'd suggest a modern overhaul. Glass steel minimalism. Something that screams future, not museum. That's what I tell my clients: you have to evolve or die. The investors, men who owned fleets of tankers and swathes of downtown Tokyo, looked at him with polite, veiled amusement, but said nothing. Carson took their silence for awe. Beside him, Tiffany shifted her weight from one foot to the other. She was tapping furiously on her phone, her face illuminated by the cold blue light of the screen. "Carson, my feet are literally killing me," she whined, not looking up. "And the service here is trash. I've been trying to upload a story of the ice sculpture for 10 minutes. It's failing. How can a billionaire not have 5G? "Hush, babe," Carson hissed, flashing a fake, blinding smile at a passing socialite. He leaned in close to Tiffany's ear, his grip on her arm tightening slightly. "Do you have any idea who is in this room? We are moments away from the biggest deal of my life. The chairwoman is going to be here any second. Just look pretty, hold your drink, and don't speak unless someone asks you about, I don't know, charity or puppies. Whatever." Tiffany sighed, rolling her eyes. "Just get the deal signed so we can go to Cabo. I need a vacation from your war stress." Suddenly, the hum of conversation in the great hall was severed. The massive crystal chandeliers overhead dimmed, casting the room into a dramatic twilight. A single intense spotlight cut through the darkness, illuminating the top of the grand, sweeping staircase. The silence was instant and absolute. Benedict Joyce stepped into the light. He stood at the landing looking less like a lawyer and more like the gatekeeper to the underworld. He waited a beat, letting the anticipation curdle in the air. "Ladies and gentlemen," Benedict's voice boomed, projecting effortlessly to the back of the hall without a microphone. "Distinguished guests, it is my distinct honor to introduce you to the future of this family." Carson nudged Tiffany with his elbow. "Here we go," he whispered, a smirk playing on his lips. "Watch this. I bet she's some ancient spinster who inherited the lot and doesn't know a spreadsheet from a knitting pattern. I'm going to wrap her around my finger in 5 minutes." Benedict continued, his eyes scanning the room below. "Please welcome the new chairwoman of the Penhaligon Trust, the CEO of Helios Tech, and the sole heir to the Arthur Penhaligon estate, Ms. Madeline St. James." The name hung in the air for a fraction of a second. Carson frowned. St. James. The name scratched at the back of his mind. Familiar, but out of context, like a song he couldn't quite place. Then a figure stepped into the spotlight. A collective gip, audible and sharp, rippled through the room. The woman at the top of the stairs was a vision of terrifying elegance. She wore a custom gown of midnight blue velvet that seemed to absorb the light hugging her frame like a second skin before cascading to the floor. The fabric was dark and rich, a stark contrast to the pale luminosity of her skin. Around her throat sat the Penhaligon star, a necklace of diamonds and sapphires, so heavy and brilliant it looked like she was wearing a constellation. Her hair, once a mousy, messy bun, was now a sleek, sharp bob of dark chestnut that framed a face of porcelain perfection. Her lips were painted a deep, blood-red crimson. She didn't look like a person. She looked like a weapon forged in gold. Carson squinted, tilting his head. The bone structure, the way she held her chin high and defiant. The eyes. "No," Carson whispered. The word fell out of his mouth like a stone. His brain began to misfire, rejecting the visual data. It couldn't be. It was impossible. The woman he knew wore cardigans from Target. The woman he knew clipped coupons for laundry detergent. The woman he knew was beige. Madeline began to descend the stairs. Click, click, click. The sound of her heels on the marble was the only sound in the cavernous room. She didn't look at the crowd. She didn't look at the floor. Her eyes were locked on one specific point in the room. She was looking directly at Carson. Every step she took was a hammer blow to his reality. As she drew closer, the impossible became undeniable. The way she walked, it was the same stride, but stripped of the apology that used to define it. "Carson," Tiffany whispered, tugging on his sleeve. "Why is she staring at us?" "Do you know her?" Carson couldn't speak. His throat had closed up. The champagne in his stomach turned to acid. Madeline reached the bottom of the stairs. The crowd, sensing the kinetic energy between the air and the guest, parted instinctively. They opened a wide lane, creating a path that led straight to Carson Walsh. She walked the gauntlet. She smelled of expensive jasmine, cold ozone, and absolute power. She stopped exactly 2 feet from him, close enough for him to see the gold flecks in her eyes he had looked into for 6 years and never really seen. "Hello, Carson," she said. Her voice was smooth, cool, and utterly devoid of warmth. It was the voice of a judge delivering a verdict. "Maddie." Carson choked out his voice, cracking like a teenager's. "Madeline, is that really you? You look surprised." Madeline said, a small, humorless smile touching her lips. "Did you think I wouldn't make the guest list?" I don't understand," Carson stammered. He looked around wildly, as if expecting a camera crew to jump out. "Your mom?" "The nursing home, the money. You asked me for moving costs. My mother is currently resting in the West Wing," Madeline said, her voice sharpening. "She's receiving the best care in the world, which I might add is significantly more than she ever received when I was begging you to help with her prescriptions." Carson flinched. He tried to recover his survival instincts kicking in. He forced his face into a mask of charm, though his smile was trembling at the edges. "Wow, Maddie, you look incredible. Truly, I mean, look at you." He gestured to her gown, his hands shaking. "I always knew you had this potential. I always told you that you were special, didn't I? Deep down, I knew." "Actually," Madeline interrupted, her tone light but lethal. "You said I was beige. You told me I was a placeholder. You said I didn't fit your brand." She glanced at Tiffany, who was staring open-mouthed, clutching her designer clutch like a life preserver. "And you said you needed an upgrade." A ripple of whispers broke out across the room. The ex-wife. He left the Penhaligon air. The socialites covered their mouths, their eyes darting between the 3 of them, drinking in the drama. "I was stressed." Carson laughed nervously, reaching out as if to touch her arm. Madeline didn't move, but her gaze was so cold he froze mid-reach. "Business was hard, Maddie. You know how it is. We said things we didn't mean. But look at us now. This is fate. You, me, here. Benedict said you wanted to discuss a partnership, an acquisition." Carson's eyes lit up with a desperate hope. "That's it, isn't it? You want to bring me in. You know I can run the marketing side of this empire better than anyone. We were always a good team, Maddie." "I do want to discuss your business," Madeline said. She raised her gloved hand and snapped her fingers. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Behind her, a massive projection screen descended from the ceiling, unrolling with a mechanical whir. "I've been reviewing your portfolio, Carson," Madeline said, her voice amplified now, carrying to every corner of the room. "And I noticed some irregularities." The screen flickered to life. It didn't show a marketing reel. It didn't show branding concepts. It displayed the internal balance sheet of Walsh Creative Group. The numbers were big, they were bold, and they were violently red. Insolvent. Madeline read the header aloud. You haven't made a net profit in 18 months. You've been hemorrhaging cash. You funded your lifestyle, the Porsche, the trips to Saint-Tropez, the ring currently on Tiffany's finger, on high-interest corporate loans. Carson's face drained of blood, turning a sickly shade of grey. Madeline, stop this. This is private corporate data. You can't show this. Actually, it's my data, Madeline said calmly. You see, Carson, you borrowed that money from Chimera Capital, a shadow lender known for its aggressive terms. She took a step closer to him, invading his space. Did you know who owns Chimera, Carson? She pointed a gloved finger at her own chest. I do. The room gasped. I bought your debt. Madeline continued, her voice dropping to a terrifying whisper that only he and the front row could hear. All of it. The business loan, the mortgage on your penthouse, even the lease on your precious 911 G2. I own it all. Tiffany let out a sharp shriek. You don't own the condo, Carson. You told me you bought it with cash from the Google deal. Madeline ignored Tiffany. She kept her eyes pinned on Carson, watching the light die in his eyes. You came here tonight thinking you were getting a buyout, Madeline said. You thought you were going to charm the chairwoman, get a check and save your skin. You thought you were the hero of this story. She leaned in her lips, inches from his ear. But I didn't bring you here to save you, Carson. I brought you here to foreclose on you. Madeline turned to Benedict Joyce, who was standing by with a thick manila envelope. Execute the default clause. Benedict stepped forward, his face impassive. He shoved the envelope into Carson's limp hands. Mr. Walsh, as per the terms of your agreement, Chimera Capital is exercising its right to immediate repayment in full. Since your accounts show zero liquidity, we are seizing all collateral. Effective immediately, Walsh Creative is a wholly owned subsidiary of Penhaligon Industries. Your position as CEO is terminated for gross negligence. You can't do this. Carson screamed, his voice rising to a hysterical pitch. He looked around the room, begging for an ally. She's crazy. This is a vendetta. Someone help me. But the elite of New York stared back at him with cold, detached disgust. In their world, losing money was a sin. Lying about it was a social death sentence. Being publicly destroyed by the most powerful woman in the room, that was just entertainment. And, Benedict added, checking his pocket watch, we have already sent a team to secure the assets. Your condo locks have been changed. The Porsche in the driveway. Well, the valet has handed the keys to our transport team. Carson stood there, stripped of everything his company, his home, his car, his status in under 3 minutes. He looked at Madeline, his eyes wet with tears of panic. Maddie, please, he whimpered. We were family. You loved me once. You can't leave me on the street. I have nowhere to go. Madeline looked at him. She remembered standing on the curb in the rain, shivering next to her boxes. She remembered the sound of his engine revving as he sped away. She remembered him telling her to put the dry cleaning receipt on the trash can. I'm not leaving you on the street, Carson, Madeline said softly. A flicker of hope sparked in his eyes. I'm leaving you exactly where you left me, she finished. And don't worry about your clothes. I had them packed in boxes. You can pick them up at the front gate. If it rains, well, I suggest you try to move fast. She turned her back on him. It was a dismissal more painful than a slap. Security, she commanded calmly. Please escort Mr. Walsh off my property. He is trespassing. Two large men in dark suits materialized from the shadows. They grabbed Carson by the arms, hoisting him up as his knees buckled. "Tiffany!" Carson yelled as he was dragged backward, his heels skidding on the marble. "Tiffany, baby, come on. We have to go. We'll fix this." Tiffany stood there, frozen. She looked at the wealthiest woman in the Western Hemisphere, standing tall and regal. Then she looked at the broke, sweating, screaming man being hauled away like garbage. Slowly, deliberately, Tiffany pulled the massive diamond engagement ring off her finger. "Actually," Tiffany said, her voice carrying clearly. She tossed the ring at Carson. It bounced off his chest and clattered onto the floor. "I think I'll take an Uber. That ring was probably cubic zirconia anyway." The crowd erupted into polite, restrained applause as the heavy oak doors slammed shut behind Carson Walsh, cutting off his screams. Madeline didn't look back. She took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of victory. She took a crystal flute of champagne from a passing waiter, raised it to the stunned room, and offered them a dazzling, genuine smile. "Now," she said, her voice steady and commanding, "who wants to talk about the future of shipping?" 1 year later. The morning sun sliced through the floor-to-ceiling glass of the Penhaligon Tower, bathing the 50th floor office in a sharp, golden light. It was a view that commanded respect. Manhattan sprawled out below like a circuit board of steel and ambition moving to a rhythm that Madeline. James now helped orchestrate. She sat behind a massive desk, hewn from the reclaimed timber of her grandfather's first merchant vessel. The wood was rough-hewn and dark, a tactile reminder that this empire wasn't built on paper, but on grit and ocean spray. Madeline uncapped her fountain pen, the nib scratching softly against the heavy bond paper. She was finalizing a personal contribution, a $10 million grant to the National Alzheimer's Association. She paused for a moment, letting the ink dry. A year ago, $10 felt like a fortune. Today she could change the trajectory of medical research with a signature. But the money mattered less to her than the peace it had purchased. Her mother Margaret was no longer staring at the peeling paint of a state-run facility. She was living in the guest cottage at Blackwood Manor, a space filled with natural light, soft linens, and the scent of fresh lavender. She had a full-time care team that treated her like royalty. Just yesterday, Margaret had recognized Madeline, squeezing her hand and asking if they could plant hydrangeas in the spring. That single moment was worth every stressful board meeting, every hostile negotiation, and every sleepless night of the past 12 months. Madeline set the pen down and checked her tablet. Her schedule was a fortress of obligations, a lunch meeting with the Japanese trade minister at noon, followed by a quarterly review of the Helios Tech division. Her life was full. It was demanding. But for the first time in her history, it was entirely hers. She reached for the magazine sitting on the corner of her desk. It was the latest issue of Forbes. Dominating the cover was a portrait of a woman with sharp chestnut hair, piercing eyes, and a slight knowing smile. The headline was bold and uncompromising, "The Iron Rose." How Madeline St. James redefined the modern empire. Madeline ran a finger over the glossy cover. She barely recognized herself in the photo. The frightened woman who had stood in the rain with 3 soggy boxes was gone, burned away by necessity. In her place was this titan, a woman who had learned that kindness didn't have to mean weakness. She flipped through the magazine, skimming the articles about market trends and tech futures until she reached the back pages. She stopped at the gossip and grifter column, a guilty pleasure section that tracked the rise and fall of New York's social climbers. There, tucked in the bottom corner, was a grainy, candid photograph taken on a cell phone. The setting was unmistakably unglamorous, the fluorescent-lit rental car kiosk at LaGuardia Airport. The subject was a man wearing a bright, ill-fitting, yellow polyester vest over a wrinkled shirt. His hairline was receding, and deep bags hung under his eyes. He was captured mid-shout, pointing a finger at an angry customer likely arguing about a hidden fuel surcharge. The caption was brief and brutal. How the mighty have fallen. Former marketing hotshot Carson Walsh spotted working the budget counter at Thrifty. Madeline studied the image. She looked for the anger that had fueled her for so long. She looked for satisfaction, for the thrill of vengeance. But as she stared at Carson's tired, frustrated face, she realized something profound. She felt absolutely nothing. The hate had evaporated, leaving behind only a mild indifference. He wasn't a monster anymore. He was just a stranger. He was a lesson she had learned the hard way, a chapter she had finished reading and closed the book on. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Benedict Joyce entered the room. His silver hair was perfectly coiffed, and he carried a tablet with the air of a man who knew he was the right hand of power. Their relationship had evolved over the year. He was no longer just her lawyer or mentor. He was her partner in the trenches. "The car is waiting downstairs, chairwoman," Benedict said, checking his watch. "Traffic is building up on the FDR." "Thank you, Benedict. I'm ready." "Oh, and one more thing." Benedict paused, a mischievous glint in his blue eyes. He pulled a crumpled envelope from his inner jacket pocket. "This arrived at the front desk this morning. It's from Mr. Walsh." Madeline raised an eyebrow, though her pulse remained steady. "Oh, he's asking for a meeting." Benedict explained, his tone dry. "And a small bridge loan. Apparently he has a concept for a revolutionary car wash app that utilizes blockchain technology. He claims it will disrupt the industry." Madeline laughed. It wasn't a bitter laugh, nor was it mocking. It was the light, airy sound of someone who was truly free. The sheer audacity of the man was almost impressive in its delusion. "A blockchain car wash?" she mused, shaking her head. "Shall I draft a formal rejection?" Benedict asked, holding the letter over the recycling bin. Madeline stood up, smoothing the lapels of her blazer. She looked out the window one last time at the city that sparkled like a field of diamonds. "No need for formalities," she said, grabbing her purse. "Shred it." "Already done?" Benedict grinned, crushing the envelope in his hand. Madeline walked toward the heavy oak doors of her office. She didn't glance back at the Forbes magazine, or The View, or the ghost of the life she used to have. She had a meeting to get to. She had an empire to run. She had walked through fire to get here, and she had come out the other side not as ash, but as steel. Madeline St. James stepped out into the hallway, the rhythm of her heels echoing like a heartbeat against the marble, moving steadily, unyieldingly, into the future. Carson thought Madeline was worthless because she didn't sparkle like a trophy. He didn't realize that while he was chasing glitter, he was throwing away a diamond. He learned the hardest lesson of all. You should never judge someone's value by their current struggle, because you never know who they are destined to become. Madeline didn't just inherit a fortune, she inherited her self-worth. And Carson. He inherited exactly what he gave nothing. Who do you think had the most satisfying ending? Was Madeline too harsh, or did Carson get exactly what he deserved? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of karma and justice, please smash that like button It really helps the channel grow, and if you haven't already hit subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We have a crazy tale coming up next week about a lottery winner who hid his ticket in a place his greedy family would never look. You don't want to miss it. Thanks for watching, and remember, be careful who you step on your way up. You might meet them on your way down. See you next time.